Perfect. All right. It being 6 o'clock on Monday, May 11th, let's begin. This is our fourth in a series of our budget hearings for the Committee of Ways and Means. All votes will be by roll call, and if you would like to speak, please use the raise hand function. Just as a reminder, anyone in the public who has questions, please reach out to the town council via our town council email. I know we've received a few inquiries from the public in the past week. We will be able to get your questions answered ahead of the town meeting, which is currently scheduled for June 2nd, and that will be the official public hearing. And just a few more things, just a couple of housekeeping items. First of all, I want to make sure to say thank you to the mayor's staff, the chiefs who are here with us tonight, for answering all of our questions and providing the summaries in such nice detail. And then for members of the committee, if you are considering or feel like you need more information and would like a callback from any of the departments or the mayor's staff, please reach out to Sue in the next few days so that we can begin to work with the mayor's office to make sure we can get that scheduled in due time. So I think that is it for housekeeping. Clerk Semino, if we can have a roll call, we can officially begin the meeting.
Councilor Baraka.
Here.
Councilor Connors should be here momentarily, hopefully. Councilor Flaherty. Here. Councilor Ryan.
Here.
Councilor Sasha.
Here.
4 present.
Thank you. There are no minutes to approve this evening, and there is no old business. Here's Councilor Connors. So we can move on to new business, which is 20038 Mayor FY 2021 operating budget, or take up any action relative thereto. Is there a motion to take off the table order 20038?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Roll call vote, please, Clerk Semino.
Councilor Baraka.
Yes.
Councilor Connors.
Yes.
Councilor Flaherty.
Yes.
Councilor Ryan.
Yes.
Councilor Sasha.
Yes.
All in favor.
Okay, thank you. So we are going to be covering this evening both the fire and the police budgets. We will start with fire, and before we get on to the questions, Solicitor Taub, did you have opening comments?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I'm joined this evening by Finance Director Ed Spellman, as well as Fire Chief James O'Brien and Marianne Bossi from the Fire Department. Tonight you're going to hear from both police and fire, the town's public safety entities, a group of individuals who as a collective consistently and as part of their everyday responsibilities goes above and beyond to ensure the health, safety, and welfare of the residents of the town of Braintree. I couldn't be prouder of the work that these two organizations do, and I'm really excited for them to have an opportunity this evening to give you somewhat of an introductory overview of how their departments are set up and the services that they provide, and then open up the floor for any questions that you might have. Appreciating this is the first time for some of you to have that opportunity with our two public safety chiefs this evening. So I'm not going to take up any more of your time. I'm going to turn it over straight to the experts and hand my computer over to Chief O'Brien.
Thank you.
Hello, everybody.
Hi there.
Hello.
How are you? I want to thank you all for meeting with us tonight, and I look forward, I know there's a lot of new faces, I look forward to meeting with the Ways and Means, as well as the Town Council going forward. So I was asked to discuss some priorities for the Braintree Fire Department as we head into the new fiscal year. And I can tell you that my top priority as a chief is the health and safety of our firefighters. In particular, dealing with the current pandemic we all now face. It's of the utmost importance that we have a continuous supply of PPE, cleaning products, as well as a sanitary environment in which to work in. And this, of course, would bode well for the residents in our community that we respond to on a daily basis. Another priority we have is the pending, I should say, renovation of our headquarters station. I don't know how many of you have actually been to headquarters. It's quite a treat when you walk in there, so you would know exactly what I'm talking about. It was built in 1931 and last modified by our own firefighters in 1975. As I've said, the building is in deplorable condition and in desperate need of an upgrade. And through capital funding, we've secured money that will bring the station hopefully into the 21st century. And keeping in mind the current health crisis surrounding us and understanding the sensitivity of it, we may be delayed in the start of construction, possibly spring of 21, hopefully sooner, but realistically, spring of 21. We expect the renovation to last 12 to 18 months and look forward to its completion so we can have a modern station that our firefighters deserve and the town can be proud of. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you very much, Chief O'Brien. And I'm sure I speak for all the committee members to express our gratitude to you and your entire crew, not just in the last 3 months, but every single day of the year, 24 hours a day. And it's something the town is eternally grateful for. So thank you.
We appreciate that. Thank you.
So let me turn it over to our committee members and open up the floor for questions from the committee. Councillor Connors?
I'm the only one who ever has this. So just a couple of questions, and I'm sorry I couldn't get these in earlier, but it looks like we have 5 new positions within the fire department. Is that in the uniform branch?
Are you speaking of firefighters or admin?
Yeah.
Or we recently, within the past 8 months, have 4 new firefighters. Currently we have 2 vacancies, which we're not going to fill probably until April of next year. And on top of that, we anticipate another 5 to 6 vacancies through retirements in that time.
Okay, so maybe Nicole needs to, so in the town budget, in the payroll portion of it, it shows an increase on the uniform branch of $114,000. And then when you flip back, because you got to flip back to look at the payroll, it looks like it says current salary 0, and then it has 5 new positions, and that could be because some are retiring and they're higher steps, maybe, and these are guys coming in.
Councillor Shasha, did you?
Yes, sorry, I struggled with the same thing going through the police budget, and I finally figured it out. Those numbers for current salary do not show actuals if somebody is being replaced during the year. So that what you see there under current salary is not the prior year's budgeted amount.
If I may, Madam Chairwoman, just offer some clarity looking at the pages. So if you're in the salary detail on page 220-36 under the uniform branch, right?
Yeah.
So the last 5 positions are entry-level firefighters at current salary 0. That means there is not currently somebody in those positions.
Right.
But in fiscal 21, we are anticipating approximately 5 either retirements, resignations, promotions that are going to create vacancies. And as the chief indicated, those positions would not be filled until later points in the fiscal year, which is why you see partially funded values in the proposed salary for FY21.
Okay, that's what I thought it was, Nicole. Thank you.
Sure.
And that's why the partials are there, the only 16Ks, because they're coming in later in the year, right?
Right.
Okay. And then the $43,000 in overtime, is that was part of the reconciliation to ensure that we had proper overtime so that we didn't have to go back to the till? Is that part of it as well?
That's correct.
Sorry, Chief, one more question.
Sure.
I think I had one more question. Let me just flip through. No, I think that was it. It was the 16K issue which she resolved. So those are the only questions I had. Thank you.
Thank you,
You're welcome.
Councillor Connors. Councillor Shasha?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you, Chief. I just have a quick question. As somebody who is not a fire professional, there were a couple of things that jumped out at me. Reductions like hazmat expenses, fire alarm repairs. So to the untrained eye, I see that and say, whoa, are those areas that we really want to cut? But I guess the question is just, you're the fire professional. Do you think that this budget gives you everything you need to continue to keep the people of Braintree safe as you have?
I do. I think it more than does, to be honest with you. We, as far as the fire suppression and the fire alarm superintendent's job, what we've done in the past few years is eliminate a lot of the street boxes, which requires less maintenance by our fire alarm superintendent. So that's why you would see a reduction there. Going forward, we're just going to use the municipal boxes, the boxes you see outside on town hall or any municipal school buildings, places like that. We can't eliminate those. Therefore, we need to keep the superintendent's job going strong, plus the repair of all the wires in the town. We have approximately 250 miles lengthwise of fire alarm wires that need constant repair. So that budget, in my opinion, is more than suitable for what we need.
Okay, I think that's it for me then. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Counselor Ryan?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Chief, good evening. Chief, so I see that the budget only went up less than 1%. So were you asked to try to keep the budget down given the current fiscal situation?
Yes, we were.
Okay. And as my fellow counselor asked, you still feel comfortable with the level of funding in the budget? And if there are any issues that come up during the year, we can revisit them as the year progresses, I guess would be the plan.
I think so. A good chunk of the money was taken from building maintenance. And as I mentioned earlier, we plan on doing the renovations. So we're not going to need a lot of that money that would generally go to those yearly renovations. We do have 2 other fire stations. East Braintree, as you know, has been renovated in the past few years. The Highlands is relatively new. It's about 22 years old, 23 years old. So we're going to focus our attention and the money we're getting through capital on headquarters. So therefore, we don't need all of that money that we normally have appropriated.
Thank you. I wanted to ask you too, Chief, how has the coronavirus impacted your department? I know you said, making sure you have the health and safety is number one and the PPE, but how is it, I guess, from maybe let me just ask from a budgetary perspective, is it what kind of burden is it put on the department to date with the current situation?
Surprisingly, very little. I want to make sure I say this right, but a lot of people want to come to work instead of being stuck home. So our attendance is pretty good, and the overtime is down as a result. So we've had 0 infections with our personnel. We've been pretty lucky, knock on wood.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And we hope that continues.
Yeah, it must be very tough, and I commend you and your staff for having to deal with the public in emergency situations, as you always need to do. But when you add this twist of the coronavirus, and it's great work on for the town. Thank you, Chief, so much.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
One more. So, Chief, with the renovation of the firehouse, which I think we all support. We all know that it's something long overdue. Do we anticipate, with any delays that might happen, the cost going up? Every time a project gets delayed, it seems like the cost for materials and labor doesn't go down. It can go up. So I'm just wondering if we're keeping an eye on that, and we're going to have to revisit that.
I really don't anticipate anything going up. I think the delay will be minimal, maybe 5 to 6 months. I mean, there's a planning phase that we have to go through as well, architectural wise as well. And that takes time. So hopefully it all falls into place and we do start the spring of next year. So I don't anticipate any delays further than what we already have, or any increase in the budget.
Thank you, Chief.
You're welcome.
Counselor Flaherty?
Okay, Counselor Shasha asked about, your ability to keep Braintree safe, and I am satisfied that you seem to have what you need. But my question is about whether you think the budget is enough to keep the firefighters as safe as you can. I'm asking specifically from the perspective of exposure to carcinogenic chemicals, et cetera, that you exposed to more than the average resident.
So you're talking over and above the coronavirus?
Right, I'm not talking about corona, I'm talking about carcinogenic chemicals, the kinds of things that are emitted when you're fighting a fire regularly.
Sure. Well, we've recently come into NFPA compliance with 2 sets of gear per firefighter. Normally, you can't have a set of gear standard-wise that's older than 10 years old. And everybody in the department right now has 2 fully functional sets of gear, which when we have a fire, you have to, all the contaminants that you mentioned that are on your gear and on your person, you have to wash all that stuff. We also got, through grant money, 2 extractors, which are basically industrial washing machines, which we put our gear into. While that gear is washing and drying, which takes on average 3 to 4 hours, that's where that second set of gear comes in, because obviously we can't go back out into the field without any gear. So we're fully compliant there, and I'm more than confident that we're up and down the board, we're compliant.
Good, I'm happy to hear that.
Any other questions from the committee members for the chief? Chief, I have one question. I know we've been talking, well, you might not know. This committee's been talking a lot about overtime, and I know we're working hard to get that budgeted appropriately. Can you just provide a little bit of color or explanation on how at the fire department overtime is assigned and how does it impact the rate of overtime? And I'll be asking the police chief the same.
Sure. So the Braintree Fire Department is on a 17-man minimum that's contractual. We have been for, I would say, 25 years now. When we're allowed to have 5 firefighters off per shift. Each group, we have 4 groups of 21 firefighters. And if you have 5 off, obviously you dip 1 below the minimum manning, which would necessitate the hiring of overtime. So when you add in sick time or personal leave or other situational leave, that adds to the overtime budget each fiscal year. But we're married to that minimum manning clause. That's it's been here for, I think, 40 plus years. It has fluctuated from 20 men to 19 to 18 and 17 where we currently sit. And
that's a state mandate, the 17 minimum?
No, that goes by each municipality, the size of the town. That's what each town or city would go by.
Got it. So then is the overtime rotated amongst all of the crew?
Yes, it's there's pretty strict charts kept on it. So everything's fair and equitable as far as who gets the overtime. There's a separate chart for officers versus firefighters. So that's the only difference that we would have.
Perfect. Thank you for that explanation.
You're welcome.
And thank you for all the upfront work you did in answering our questions as well. Any other questions for the fire chief from the committee? Councilor Ryan?
Thank you, Chief. And everything that was negotiated through collective bargaining has been included in this budget. Any increases, any negotiated equipment or anything, everything's in the budget?
For the most part, right now, the union is ratifying the latest CBA. It was ratified, excuse me, last week. So that I would have to let Nicole speak to as far as the money part of that goes. And she's coming over right now.
Thank you. So this includes the largest financial component of the contract, which is the 3% cost of living. There are some other adjustments that will likely have to be made, but given their size, we're anticipating we can make that up in other areas in the budget without having to increase them. And since the union just ratified last week, there wasn't an opportunity, and we didn't want to presuppose the outcome of that by incorporating all of the components in. But like I said, the largest, the 3%, is reflected in the salaries that you see in the payroll estimates.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the chief? All right. I think in that case, thank you so much, Chief O'Brien. And again, please pass along our thanks to your team. Appreciate it.
I will do that, and thank you for the work you guys do. It's much appreciated.
Thank you. So Solicitor Taub, I think we can move to police.
Well,
No?
I'm gonna take this back here, and I'm going, so we are running quite a bit ahead of schedule. So I think that the team from police anticipated being here at 6:30.
Okay.
But I do have at least one update, if I may provide to the committee. So quite timely, late Friday afternoon, we got word from the land court that the court on its own initiative decided to move up the argument on the billboard from June to this morning. So arguments were held via telephonic conference with the land court today. John Goldrosen from my office participated. He reported back he felt that overall well, and that the court had taken it under advisement and at this point has everything it's going to have to make a decision on the 290 Wood Road billboard application. So, you know, I will say I have cases that are 3 years post trial and argument. We're still waiting for a decision, but I think because the court pulled it up on its own and moved it up in the schedule, that hopefully that's a good sign that we're going to see a determination sooner rather than later. So obviously I will keep everybody posted on that. And then on Allen Street, I wanted to provide a little bit of clarification, and I'm going to provide in paper copy a timeline so that everybody kind of understands where the sale of Allen Street has stood over the course of the years. But one thing I did want to clarify is the last time the RFP was published was, you know what, and I'm going to look so that I don't get the date wrong here. Not because I'm killing time, I promise.
That was our quickest one yet, so understandable.
Yeah. And we had the longest time blocked. So, so Allen Street, just to give kind of a little bit of an overview, which I'll provide in writing, originally the start of the potential for sale for Allen Street dates back to April of 2014. And the council first authorized the mayor to sell the property in June of 15, which is when an RFP was first published. In July of 15, a bid was submitted and it was accepted in roughly the fall of 2015, right? So that's when the town had a buyer for Allen Street. The negotiations with the developer went for about 2.5 years, and that involved negotiating a purchase and sale agreement and a land development agreement. And then in early 2018, those negotiations kind of came to a stalemate, and the parties basically terminated the negotiations, therefore terminating the sale of the property. So that officially happened in June of 2018. So from June of 2018 to the present, the town, while internally preparing and anticipating for the sale of the property, didn't actually put the property on the market. So I want to make sure that that's clear, because there's been a lot of questions about, well, what's different now? How can we be confident that the property is going to sell? Well, I can tell you at a minimum, I'm confident it's going to sell because we're putting it on the market, which has not been the case over the last year. So a big step for that was getting the appraisal completed, which is completed. The appraisal is in near final form. The the company who did the appraisal for us is working with John Goldrosen and Bob Brinkman to finalize the document. And then we have that to incorporate into the RFP, which will mirror on some level the RFP from 2015, but there has been some changes based on kind of the lessons learned from where the process stalled the first time around. And so the property will go on the market for sale, eligible for purchase. The goal is to do that before the end of this fiscal year to facilitate a sale in fiscal 21. So I wanted to make sure that that was clear. And like I said, I will provide the committee with a more detailed kind of timeline of that. But at its baseline, how am I sure, or how am I confident it's going to sell? We're going to put it on the market. First and foremost, I think that's a necessary step that wasn't taken in this past year or in the year prior in order to get the property off the market. So I just wanted to provide this committee with some of those verbal updates, and then I'll follow up with that in writing, just so that we have it as part of the larger record here for these proceedings.
Thank you, Solicitor Taub. I see Councillor Flaherty. Did you have a question?
Yes, I'm curious about the negotiations where everything broke down in the fall of 2018. Can you share details about why that fell apart, and are there any lessons that we've learned from that or information to be gleaned from that experience?
There are certainly lessons that we've learned from that, but before I think we should consider potentially having an executive session to talk about those negotiations and talk about how we're going to move those forward. I think there was a lot of discussion around the terms of the purchase and sale agreement, and I think we intend at this point, which is not uncommon, to include a purchase and sale agreement with the RFP when it goes out to bid, so the terms are clear and the terms of the sale are going to be upfront and a known bidder before they bid on the project.
Thank you. Councillor Connors?
So Nicole, when you guys send out the RFP, is it going to be a highest bid competition versus, obviously anybody who's interested in it knows what the appraisal value is, but there's obviously a lot more they can do with that property to turn it around and make some money. So does it become like I'm not going to say a bidding war, but an RFP that it will go to the highest bidder versus whoever meets the 1.3 standard?
So there will be presumably an evaluation criteria, and much like the last time the project went out to bid, there's going to be certain required uses for pieces of that land, and then there will be preference given to certain additional uses or additional kind of qualifications or qualities for use of the land. So it's not strictly going to be a money-based determination, but certainly how much money will come to the town in return for the sale of the property is going to be a big factor.
So it'll be based on a overall best value type contract where the percentage of factors are based on pricing, technical, what they're going to do with the land, and that will all be put in the RFP, I assume, as far as how it's going to be awarded and what the criteria are for award.
Exactly.
And that will obviously be public on the RFP website when it comes out.
Oh, of course, absolutely. And I mentioned this, we've received, I get a check-in from a developer at least once a month looking for a status. We recently got a call from another developer looking for a status. So like I said, we just have to take that first step, which I'm anticipating we take before the end of this fiscal year.
Councillor Shasha?
Hi, thank you. Nicole, will the residents be able to weigh in on the RFP before it goes out, or are they going to see it for the first time when it's put out?
They will likely see it for the first time when it's put out. It has not been the town's practice to engage in public comment on RFP. It's the mayor has provided his input for the terms that we'd be looking for the sale of the property.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Connors?
Sorry, one more question, Nicole. So when it comes out, will the RFP also indicate that the Allen Street is now becoming a one-way street and that traffic can only flow one way, and that will be taken into account with the developer, how they're going to avoid putting all sorts of traffic into the community versus Quincy Ave?
I'd have to go back and take a look, but I can certainly check to see if it makes reference to the one-way street.
it's going to have a significant impact on a developer coming into this, right? They can only go one way down a street. That shouldn't be a one way, so.
So Solicitor Taub, I have a question just going back to the billboard. Do you anticipate, I know you said some decisions can take years to come through. Do you anticipate a decision sooner rather than later? And what's our level of confidence that it will go in our favor?
So,
Is that something we can even anticipate?
so I learned early on in my career that you can't spend too much time thinking that you know what the court is going to do, whether it's timing or whether it's outcome. I do think that the fact that the court took it upon itself to move the hearing date up is perhaps an indicator that we're going to see a decision sooner rather than later. But what that decision is, again, that's one of those things where I certainly could provide my legal opinion or recommendation on, but it's not something that we should do in an open forum.
Thank you.
So I think if you could give us a moment on our end, if there are no other questions on these revenue items or anything else, I suppose, while I'm here, I'm going to just get organized a little bit on the police and so that we can keep going.
Thank you. Yep, and to members of the public who are in attendance, if you could just bear with us for 5 minutes, we'll be back on track. Just while we're waiting, because we do have members from the public in attendance tonight, I can provide a little intermission update for everyone. We will be reconvening on Wednesday when we will be going over the budget for our Blue Hills Regional High School. And then next week on the 18th, we'll be reviewing the Department of Elder Affairs, municipal licenses and inspections, and planning and community development. And then on the 19th is when we will be reviewing the education budget. So the school department will be in front of us on the 19th as well. And we've also requested from the mayor's office that they publish all of the question and answers that we have asked and they have answered on the town's website. And I know that the mayor's office is working on doing that. So the questions we've submitted will be available for the public to view shortly.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, Solicitor Taub.
Thank you for indulging the delay there.
No problem. So I was remiss in announcing the page numbers for the fire department. So police can be found in the budget books on pages 33 to 42. And Solicitor Taub, did you want to speak or turn it over to the chief?
Certainly, I would take, since they didn't hear me the first time, again, being able to introduce this evening representatives from our police department. It is, an incredibly proud moment for me because I think that they do amazing work on behalf of the residents of our community, and the safety, again, and welfare of our residents is an absolute priority for the police force, and under the direction of, I guess, not so newly appointed Chief Mark DuBois and slightly newer Deputy Chiefs Cahoon and Want. I am so confident in the public safety services that are being provided to our residents on a day-to-day basis. I'm joined this evening from the police department by Chief DuBois, Deputies Cahoon and Want, as well as Sergeant Corey Chambers, who plays an integral role in the financial circumstances or financial backing of the police department. So I know a lot of you have not had an opportunity to officially meet Chief DuBois, so I've asked him if he could share with you a little bit of background on how things are going over at the police department, and then of course answer any questions that the committee might have for him. So with that, I'm going to turn my computer over to the chief. I'll literally turn it over.
Hello.
Good evening.
So I'll just give you a brief summary. So obviously I started in November, and there's been a lot going on here at the police department. I think that, the big things, probably the biggest thing that's happened is 2 new deputy chiefs kind of rounding out the command staff and establishing it, quite honestly. So they started in February, and one of the first things we did with Sergeant Chambers, so Sergeant Chambers is basically the financial genius behind the police department. And he has been for several years, so he's pretty well versed in the budget, and he's a huge part of developing it every year. So one of the first things we did was we just did a top-down operational analysis of the police department, both financially and operationally, what we do and how we do it, and if we can be better at it. And that took place, I want to say early March, and that was basically the key to our developing this year's requested budget. It was just a total analysis of everything that we do at the police department. So that's basically what we've been working on. We just analyzed the needs of the police department and the community and how we can serve them, most efficiently in the best way we can with the personnel we have. And that's resulted in some of the requests that we have and, some of the modifications that we made to this budget.
Thank you, Chief. Again, you didn't hear me earlier, but on behalf of this committee, and I think it's fair to say the community, thank you for all the work you do and your entire team does every single day. I know it's one of those things that we don't want to have to think about because you guys always are. So please pass along our gratitude to your entire staff and our thanks as well.
I certainly will.
Great. And I do, and thank you for the upfront work your team did answering our questions in advance. And I want to open it up now for additional questions from the committee members. Counselor Connors.
So Chief, can you just go through, there's obviously a lot of salaries and numbers and everything. Can you go through what you're looking for new hires for this year versus retirees coming up this year? Just to kind of get a feel of how many people are retiring, how many new hires are coming in based on retirees and based on just new hires.
Sure. It's kind of some of the people have retired just right now, just recently. And we have expecting just one to retire this year. So I'm getting help from all this with Sergeant Chambers. So he's, like I said, he's the mastermind behind this. So we put in for 3 new hires, and one is been offered a position, and it's a replacement for somebody who retired. Was it last? It was Preston's, right? So we had an officer who retired and passed away. Just in January, February timeframe. So the new hire is a replacement for that position. Then we had another officer who's retired May 1st. And then we have an expected retirement July 6th of this year. So those are the 3 replacements for the hires, for the new hires. So it's we're not gaining any bodies, we're just replacing the retired personnel.
That's what it looked like. I was looking to confirm if we were actually bringing on new hires or not. And the only other question I had was, there was a significant reduction in the administration clerical, but I didn't see I can't see in the salaries who was reduced or if maybe they were switched over to a different line item.
I'm gonna shift that question over to
3.
Sergeant Chambers can answer that one pretty easily.
Hi, Sergeant Chambers. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak tonight. So the primary thing that happened with the admin clerical account in program 1 is to increase transparency across all the programs in our budget. We moved several sworn personnel, police officers. In this case, it was 2 deputy chiefs and 2 lieutenants out of the admin/clerical line in program 1 and shifted them to the sworn personnel account, which didn't previously exist in that program. The only other difference in the admin/clerical account is the addition of a staff executive, which is essentially the finance position that I took over for almost 3.5 years ago.
Okay, that's what it looked like. I knew something switched because you don't have a huge increase. You had a huge decrease in one level and then a huge increase in the other. So it looked like a switch, but I just wanted to confirm. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Yep. Counselor Flaherty.
Thanks, Corey.
All right. Okay. So again, thank you so much for all the information that you provided. I saw that you had a series of like little notations on a chart that corresponded with the booklet that we had. I found that tremendously helpful. So thank you for that. I know that you answered a question via email through overtime. And I just wanted to follow up on that because as I was looking through how overtime was designated, I couldn't understand why there was so much expenditure on it and then nothing budgeted for it. And then I saw through the email that it sounds like you're budgeting all of your overtime through the Patrol Bureau and then reallocating it as the year goes by. But I don't think I'm totally clear on how you're doing that, and I'm interested in some elaboration.
Okay. How many overtime accounts are there? There's one for every group.
6.
So there's 6 different individual overtime accounts, and what we've done is we just put all the money in one program for the patrol, and just zero funded the other ones, knowing that it's going to get shifted throughout the year. But it was in the past it wasn't, but there's not enough budgeted for overtime for the entire year. So we just took the amount that was budgeted and put it in one program. Does that make sense?
Well, I'm working on it. Even if you look at what you budgeted, like FY 2018, you expended, there was a almost $643,000, and in FY 2019, there was I'm reading the educational overtime, and FY 2018 was 998, almost $1 million, and then close to the same in fiscal year 2019. And then in 2020, you budgeted $375,000 for it, which is just way, way, way less. And then expenditures were much higher than what was budgeted. And then now we have a $492,500 requested budget. I want you guys to get your overtime. I'm just trying to understand how you're doing it.
Right.
Julia, which page were you on?
Oh, page 36.
Thank
Sorry.
you. That's okay.
It's
So
the only.
I'll have Sergeant Chambers explain this because he obviously has the history of it better than I do.
Hi, so in general, in years past, the overtime budget has been about $379,000 total, which was allocated between the Patrol Bureau, which is Program 4, and the Animal Control Bureau, which is Program 10. So as part of our ongoing sort of strategic management and resource allocation plan that we've been implementing since Chief DuBois came on board, and with the mayor's office and Ed Spellman, our plan is to incrementally increase the overtime budgets in all of the all 6 overtime accounts, so that they're a more realistic number, so that we can better manage to those numbers. Luckily, this year we were able to increase the budgeted amounts to, I believe it was $500,000 total, because we know that additional funding will be necessary at some point in the year through a supplement. We choose to allocate all of the upfront budgeted funds to Program 4, Patrol, which generates by far the most overtime of any of the programs. What I do with each payroll is I track each program's or bureau's overtime, and then create moving average forecasts in order to project what I believe each bureau will come in at for the end of the year, and that sort of drives our supplemental funding. So towards the end of the year, when we have a better picture of where each bureau is when we allocate additional funding to the rest of the bureaus. Hopefully that helps a little bit to clarify things.
It does help me understand why you budget 0 for the other departments. That has clarified. But why do you under budget? Why do you make such a low budget request for overtime, even in the Patrol Bureau?
I'll probably defer to the chief or Solicitor Taub, but it's a strategic management decision.
Yeah. So it's what was allocated in the past, and obviously we know that there's a supplemental budget coming for the shortfall, and from our review of everything and discussions with the mayor and Nicole and Ed, we're trying to reduce the overtime costs, and they're trying to increase our budgeted amount. So we're trying to meet somewhere what's more realistic over probably a 3 or 5 year period, where it's an actual budgeted amount that we can work with and actually meet. It wasn't funded. There wasn't enough funded in the overtime account, and that's really what it's coming down to.
Okay.
Counselor Shawshaw?
Thank you, Chief. I just, a couple of questions. If we can stick with the overtime first. If I'm understanding correctly, it is your anticipation that the new hires will help reduce the total overtime cost going forward. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And the next question then I think is probably for Ms. Taub. The total 2019 overtime for police was 1.3 million. So even if that were to come down, is it fair to say that we should expect that before the end of the year, there would be a request to reallocate more money out of free cash to cover the difference between what is actually spent on overtime compared to what is being budgeted now?
Counselor Slash, are you asking for fiscal 20 or fiscal 21?
For fiscal 21, we have budgeted 500,000 for overtime, and it looks like something north of $1 million is probably more likely. Will that money be coming out of free cash somewhere down the road?
So a couple of things, and the chief should feel free to jump in and correct me at any moment. A variety of factors go into creating a need for overtime. That can depend on your current staffing levels. That can be impacted by people on leave, people on long-term vacations, et cetera. That also is impacted by your staffing levels. I also think to a degree, overtime is affected by management and oversight. And I can just reiterate that the management of oversight and the expenditures related thereto certainly are a priority for this administration and moving into fiscal 21. So do I think that 500,000 is a realistic number? Probably not. But do I think that we need to get to $1 million? Also, no, I do not. And the hope is that as we move forward in the combination of the increased oversight with the increase, in funding as we move forward, we will get to a place where the police department will be funded realistically to cover the overtime cost. If we, not that this is what would happen, but if you put $1 million in the account, $1 million's going to get spent. But if you work towards through consistent oversight and management, that you need for the overtime expenditures to get a real picture of what that number should look like so that it's fully funded in the budget at the beginning of the year, that's the goal and that's what we're going to get to.
Okay, but I just want to clarify that I fully applaud the goal. I mean, everybody should have a budget that they manage to. So it will be nice when everyone is at that point where the budget reflects what is likely to actually be spent. But for this coming year, whatever difference there is, whether it's 100,000 or $600,000, would have to come out of free cash.
Not necessarily. You have a couple of options as you near the end of the year. It can come out of other unspent lines within the police department's budget, whether it's in the uniform program or any of the other programs. So if there are expenditures, if there are lines that have been overfunded, for example, and there's money left as the year progresses, money can be transferred from one police program to another to cover the overtime. The same is true for any other department that has unspent funds as it nears the end of the fiscal year. So you can make program to program transfers that alleviate the need to go to free cash to supplement expenditures as the fiscal year moves forward. So not necessarily will the funds come from free cash.
Right. Yeah, I do understand that. But I mean, you do see the concern, right? Because we have just expressed concern about the state of the free cash already. And it's looking like potentially there's, let's just say, a budget shortfall, wherever it ends up coming from, with both police and fire, right? That could potentially have a further impact on free cash by the end of the year.
It could, but that's not a guarantee I guess that's my point. You asked if it's going to have to come from free cash, and my answer is no, it's not. There are other possible sources to cover shortfalls in this or any other programs at the end of next fiscal year.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And I just have one more question.
For the chief?
I don't know who would answer this question. You had provided a headcount chart for fiscal 21 with the history as well that shows 86 total headcount for fiscal 21. So I'm trying to tie it all out, and I got every number to tie out except for patrolmen in the patrol division. I swear there are 49 patrolmen listed in the payroll sheet.
So that is a question for the uniform side of this table. So I'm going to go ahead and flip the computer around.
I'll let Corey answer this one.
So I think the version that you're looking at when you're trying to count the bodies, so to speak, or lines that are allocated to an individual, one of the positions, which is it's actually split between two people, so to speak. So we have an officer who's retiring in the first week of July, and then later in the year, one of the new hires that the chief spoke about hiring would be replacing that person. So that retiree for the first week of July is only funded for those 7 days of the fiscal year. And then the amount that we would need to pay that new hire later in the year complements the retiree's salary so that you have one full-time equivalent.
Okay.
So I think if you said you were one off from my chart, that's the reason.
Okay, that explains it. Thank you so much.
Counselor Ryan?
Thank you. Good evening, Chief. Welcome.
Thank you.
Couple of questions. I see your budget, and I know the mayor asked all the departments to come in with the lowest increase possibles. And did that impact this budget? I know you came in about 5%, but did it impact trying to keep the budget down? And do you have any concerns if you had to do that?
Well, I think obviously it's an impact as we reduced it, but I don't have any concerns. We made some, alterations to what we requested originally or what we thought. And for instance, some of the new hires, we just delayed the hiring. And quite honestly, with the situation we have right now, the police academies are all on hold. So it's not really delaying anything for us because we wouldn't be able to hire somebody right now regardless. So we made some adjustments to get to the number that we were trying to get to. And I think it satisfies what we need in the service provided. And I think we're in pretty good shape.
I see that we've requested more money for educational items in the budget. Can you maybe describe some of those a little bit?
Sure.
Yeah, it's just so officers have the educational incentives. So there's a number of officers that either received an associate's or a bachelor's. So it was an increase from their education, which is contractual.
Okay, and I guess the other two questions I have are related to the contractual. There's shift diff went up a little bit, and the detective stipend. Are those new contractual items as well?
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
One more, Chief. So given the current coronavirus world we live in, how is that impacting the department? Does that have any budgetary impact on you? The department is, how about the health and safety of the offices? How's everything going? Just kind of wanted to ask a general question like that.
Thank you. The deputy chiefs are very involved in the daily activities of all the the health and safety of the officers with the supplies we need, and also Lieutenant Del Papa, who's professional standards. So the three of them pretty much every day review the supplies we have for like masks and hand sanitizer and all that, and make sure that the vehicles are all outfitted. We work with the mayor's office on, in the health department on addresses that we respond to. So we've identified all them. So we take precautions if we show up in an address that is probable to, have an infected person. So the daily operation certainly has changed, I think, dramatically for probably every police department in the country. We take a lot more precautions going into addresses and dealing with people, but we have all the equipment that we need. Like I said, they check it. We send out a supply every day of what we have, and if there's any shortfalls or concerns. So it's going well. It definitely has changed how we operate a lot. We try and limit interactions with the community in certain instances. And that, the proactive things have slowed down a little bit, but there's also a lot less traffic, and there's noticeable, I'd say, less calls for service because of this. It's starting to pick up a little bit recently, but I think the officers, their health and their safety is definitely the first priority. We've had a couple instances where people have been exposed and been out of work for a little while, so we take some precautions with that. So if we suspect somebody's been exposed, they stay home until either the quarantine period is up or if they get tested and they're negative. So then we've kind of dispersed people inside the station and spread them out just to limit the social interaction, in the 6-foot rule and inside the station, so they're not working next door to each other. But it seems to be working well, and we're in really good shape. So I think it's been positive, and no concerns there.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you for that update. And, one of the great things about the town of Braintree is our police department. We have a great police department. You've been a great addition to the department, and I'm fully going to support the department in this budget. Thank you very much, Chief.
Thank you.
Counselor Connors.
So Chief, actually, this one's for Nicole, so you might want to flip it around.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry.
I like those questions.
Back on the hotspot. So, Nicole, I'm going back to the overtime thing. So we know we can move cash out of other departments or other line items, but just because it won't affect cash for FY21, it will affect the certified free cash going into the next year, because that's, again, certified free cash that we won't have coming back out of the departments, right? So if it doesn't affect us in 21, it will affect us the following year, because it will be less certified cash that we have at the end of the year, correct?
Well, presumably either way, if the overtime needs to be supplemented, it's either going to come from free cash or it's going to come from FY20 money. So no matter where you take the funds from, you're going to start the subsequent fiscal year with less free cash.
Right. Okay. I just wanted to make sure that was understood.
Counselor Flaherty.
I have a little question for about the police budget. I'm driven out of curiosity because the amounts are really very small, but on page 35, the vehicle accident report goes from, basically being a couple of thousand to nothing. And so are we just not having vehicle accidents, or what has changed?
The vehicle accident report has just been absorbed more or less into the other fleet maintenance accounts, just in support of fiscal oversight and having an accurate budget for the coming year. Even if there are motor vehicle accidents that our insurance doesn't cover, the other fleet maintenance accounts should be able to support it.
Okay.
Counselor Ryan.
Just to get back to Counselor Connor's question, historically, when we've done supplementals, we've gone back into the unspent money in the accounts, and that's the first thing we fund the needs in the budget is unspent funds. So, and I think in the police, in a lot of departments, they don't use a vacancy rate. and they staff the positions 100%. So when they have vacancies, there's money that they can move into those. I think we mentioned in this budget that we have taken that into consideration this year with delayed hirings. But it's really, that's the first step in funding the supplemental budgets, is to use the money, the unspent funds. Thank you.
Other questions from the committee members? Chief, I think would be helpful, again, we spoke to Chief O'Brien about this as well, and just so that we have a clear understanding of the overtime situation. How is overtime assigned? So is it based on tenure? Is it based on rank? Maybe can you provide us with a little bit of color just so we understand how your department is thinking about it?
Sure, there's a whole variety of ways that somebody would get overtime. A major incident, which we just had a few weekends ago. I mean, we probably had 25 officers there, and you know, that's a driver for you know, one payroll period or maybe more. And then training in general. So all officers are required to have 40 hours of in-service training every year. So that's a driver. So out of everybody there, they all have to be out of the office for 40 hours. And it's actually, I believe it's contractual that it's overtime, right? So then any vacancy, if they're sick, if they're in a training event, if they're on vacation, we have internal minimum staffing levels that we meet just for every shift. And so what we did to try and mitigate some of that, so potentially if one person goes out on vacation for a shift, we're going to fill that shift with overtime. So as part of the mitigation with the kind of the strategy we have is we realign some of the shifts so that we can run down a certain amount of officers before we have to replace anybody. That's one of the things that we're trying to accomplish this year to reduce the overtime costs. So there's a whole bunch of different ways that overtime is kind of developed or presented to us. Court, for instance. So our detectives spend a lot of time in court, and patrol officers, you know, you might go to make an arrest and go to court multiple times, and that's all generally on overtime unless they're assigned the day shift. So, you know, there's a whole lot of drivers with overtime. It's not just one or two functions. And it's like filling a shift would be basically a seniority based, but there's so many other aspects of that doesn't matter the seniority. It's kind of by the individual.
But that rotates too, right, Chief? It's like starts with seniority, but then you go through the list and it's run by the union, right?
Correct, right.
Thank you. Thanks for that explanation. It's very helpful. Any other questions from the committee members? Chief, I know, would you be willing to indulge us, especially for the people who are in attendance, and just speak a little bit about the plans for the traffic enforcement officer? I know there were several questions that came your way about that. And of course, traffic's a huge concern for residents.
It is, and that's something that the mayor and I have talked about, and you know, in quite a bit of detail. So there was, and in the budget, there's a line item for a traffic officer, and historically, there was a person in that position, but typically what would happen is they would shift over and do another function. So we want to try and make it a standalone unit, and it's tough to do with one or two people. So, you know, we want to have the right amount of staffing so that they can perform, you know, effectively and not be taken out of that function and to do something else. So part of that is just having the right amount of staffing. Originally, probably 3 or 4 months ago, we were going to use the new hires and establish that. But as a strategy to reduce all the overtime, we reallocated those bodies that we thought we had, and we just put them into basically patrol operations as a way to just kind of backfill and into, like I said, to reduce the overtime cost. So moving forward, we do have a grant application pending for up to five bodies through the Department of Justice. So when that gets funded, or if we, if we're approved for the grant, they fund $125,000 per officer over a 3-year period. So it would give us the funding to hire 5 people, which, initially right now, I think would be the traffic unit and probably another school resource officer, because we have 1 school resource officer right now. And that's a big need that we need to kind of put some more resources into that. So it's going to depend on the grant and if we get approved, and then, how that looks when and if they approve it. And there's a lot of unknowns right now with the funding for everything. So, oh yeah. And then as an important aspect, there's something to keep in mind. I mean, it's the patrol officers are assigned a sector, and when they're not responding to calls, I mean, they do traffic enforcement. And so if we have complaints, or if we have dangerous intersections, or we identify intersections that have a lot of accidents, they'll go and do enforcement in those areas. The challenge is they might be able to stop 1 or 2 cars, and then they get a call and they have to leave.
Yeah.
So it's not as consistent as if we had a traffic unit. And also there's a lot of areas that a dedicated traffic officer could, spend a lot more time in neighborhoods and in the areas that we get a lot of complaints for, and that we have, maybe speeding cars on it more than, the neighbors would like, and more that it really should be in a neighborhood of some sort, or bad intersections or stop signs and whatnot. So yeah, patrol officers do it, but their time's limited.
Right. Counselor Ryan?
So Chief, I know we have the deployable speed limit type of equipment. Can we get any more of that? Or is that effective? What's your opinion on that?
Those are effective, and it's just a matter of, setting them up. And then a lot of times they're for data collection. Obviously, I mean, there's signs throughout town that, flash when you're exceeding whatever the speed limit is that they're posted on, which is a really good tool to just kind of bring awareness and education to a specific street. They are kind of expensive to buy. There's, a lot of trailers, mobile trailers, and you can move around and whatnot, that we see it, we see a lot of communities have them. They're definitely useful, but I think, it's a good tool in addition to obviously enforcement.
Through the chair, because I think when I see them, they seem to be doing a good job, and they're very noticeable, and it really makes people aware of how they're driving. And if we don't have sworn personnel that can do that, maybe having some of that equipment or more of it might be something might be a good idea.
Okay, sounds good. I agree with you.
Thank you.
No. And Chief, is C-Click Fix or the phone number for traffic on the website, which is preferable for residents to contact the department on like traffic and speeding issues?
Yeah, the C-Click Fix is the best way, and we get notified, and then we can assign people to it depending on the sector they're in, or if it's so one of the things when we have extra bodies on shifts, we have what's called spare cars. So there's the sector assignments, and then we have additional people, which ideally, there will be a lot of times we have additional patrols out there. So that's when we have the ability to do the extra stuff other than just being stuck in a sector for the minimum. So that's when they'll do things like that, where they can get assigned to a certain area and do traffic enforcement.
Awesome, thank you. Any other questions from the committee members for the chief? Okay. Don't see any. I think we're all set then, Chief. Thank you again, and please pass along our thanks to your crew. Much appreciated.
Thank you. Very well.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thank you. All right, so we have finished this evening's budget hearings, and is there a motion to table order 20038 until May 13th, 2020?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Clerk Semino, roll call vote, please.
Council Verica,
Yes.
Council Connors,
Aye.
Council Flaherty,
Yes.
Council Ryan,
Aye.
Council Sasha,
Yes.
all in favor.
Thank you. Next item, 20039 Mayor FY 2021 Budget, Community Preservation Committee, or take up any action relative thereto. There is no action required on this order this evening, and it has been tabled until May 18th, 2020. Likewise, order number 20040, the revolving accounts, no action is required on that, and that has also been tabled to May 18th, 2020. Just one more reminder to the committee members. Donna, I don't think you had joined when we talked about this earlier. If you are thinking that we need additional information from any of the department heads, the mayor's office, or any of the topics for callback action, if you can reach out to Sue in the next few days, that would be great. And other than that, I think, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Clerk Semino, roll call vote, please.
Council Verica,
Yes.
Council Connors,
Aye.
Council Flaherty,
Yes.
Council Ryan,
Aye.
and Council Sasha,
Yes.
all in favor to adjourn.
Thank you. That is unanimous, and this meeting is adjourned. Have a
Good night,
day.
everybody.
Thanks.
Good night.
Good night.